Didn't ask for the keys. She demanded them. Right there in front of 63 people sitting at white linen tables with half-eaten appetizers in front of them, my daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and held out her hand like I was the valet. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a man who cries easily. I built a landscaping company from a used pickup truck and a borrowed chainsaw when I was 26 years old. I worked through a divorce, through a recession, through the year my left knee needed replacing, and I still showed up to job sites because the business didn't run itself. I am 64 years old and I have earned every gray hair on my head. So when I tell you that what happened at my son's rehearsal dinner made me feel something I haven't felt since I was a boy, I need you to understand the weight of that. My son Nathan is 31. He is smart, genuinely smart, the kind of kid who could have done anything. He chose finance, works at a firm in Charlotte. Makes good money now, though. For the first several years, it was me covering the gap between his salary and his lifestyle. The apartment he rented when he first moved there, I co-signed. The car he drove to client meetings, I helped with the down payment. When he called me 2 years ago and said he was having trouble with some credit card debt, I didn't lecture him. I just asked him how much, and I wrote the check. I tell you all of this not to make myself sound generous. I tell you because it matters to what comes next. He met Serena at some rooftop event in uptown Charlotte. She's 28, grew up in a wealthy family in Connecticut, and she has never in the time I've known her asked a single question about anyone other than herself. Not once. The first time Nathan brought her home to meet me in Raleigh, she walked through my house the way a real estate agent walks through a property she's about to flip. She complimented the square footage. She looked at the photo of my late wife Nathan's mother Linda, who died when Nathan was 19, and said, "Oh, is that his mom?" She looked sweet. Then she moved on to examine the kitchen countertops. I told myself she was nervous. I told myself she came from a different world and didn't know how to behave in mine. I kept telling myself that for 2 years. The engagement happened fast, 11 months after they met. Nathan called me on a Tuesday evening, and I could hear in his voice that he'd already made up his mind before he dialed. He wasn't asking for my opinion. He was informing me. I said I was happy for him because he is my son, and I love him, and that is what you say. Then the planning started. Serena's parents are wealthy in a way that makes them believe money is a personality. Her father, from what Nathan told me, has an import business and a second home in Hilton Head. They contributed exactly nothing toward the wedding. I found this out gradually in pieces, the way you find out most things that are designed to be hidden from you. First it was, we were thinking a venue in Charlotte. Then it was, Serena really loves the Ballantine. Then it was Nathan on the phone saying, "Dad, I know this is a lot to ask," and me already reaching for my checkbook before he finished the sentence. $48,000. That is what I paid for my son's wedding. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the photographer, the band. I also paid for his bride's rehearsal dinner dress because Serena mentioned offhand that it was something the groom's family traditionally covers, and Nathan looked at me with those eyes, and I just nodded. I did not say a word about the money. Not once. It was a gift. Freely given. I want to be clear about that too. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding at a restaurant called Hawthorne's downtown. Private room in the back. 40 guests. Open bar. I got there early because that is who I am. I helped the event coordinator set up the table assignments. I spoke with the catering manager about the dietary restrictions we'd submitted. I was doing what I do, which is making sure things run smoothly so that the people I love can enjoy themselves. Serena arrived 45 minutes late. She came in with her mother and 2 bridesmaids and did not acknowledge me when she walked through the door. I said hello to her. She said, "Oh, hi," without looking up from her phone, and went to find Nathan at the bar. The dinner went fine. The food was good. People laughed. Nathan gave a toast that was kind and that mentioned his mother, which I appreciated. I was beginning to think maybe I'd been too hard on Serena in my head. Maybe she was just nervous about the wedding. Maybe this was her way. Then, during dessert, she came and sat down next to me. I thought she wanted to say something kind, maybe thank me for dinner, for the wedding, for any of it. Instead, she set her small clutch purse on the table, folded her hands, and said in a voice that was very calm and very deliberate, "I want to talk to you about the lake house." Now, I need to pause here and explain something. My lake house is on Lake Norman, about 45 minutes north of Charlotte. My wife Linda and I bought it in 2003. It is where we spent summers. It is where Nathan learned to swim, where he caught his first fish, where we scattered Linda's ashes off the dock in 2011. It is 3 bedrooms, nothing fancy, and it is the most valuable thing I own, not in dollars, but in every other way that matters. I had mentioned at some point in the previous year that I was thinking about the future of the property. I had said, and I remember this clearly, that I intended to leave it to Nathan in my will. I said intended. I said in my will. I said nothing about right now. Nothing about transferring anything, nothing about keys. Serena apparently heard something different. She said very calmly, Nathan and I have been talking, and we think it makes more sense for the lake house to just be in our names now. So we can use it when we want, plan around it, maybe rent it out on weekends for income. It makes more financial sense. I looked at her. I said, Serena, this isn't really the time or place for this conversation. She said, I think it's a fine time. You had a few drinks. You're in a good mood. She said that. She actually said that. I said, the lake house is in my name and it will stay in my name for as long as I'm alive. If you and Nathan want to use it, all you have to do is ask. She said, that's not really a long-term solution. I said, I'm 64, not 94. I think we have time. And then she said, and I will never in my life forget this. Look, I'm going to be direct. We need the keys and we need to be on the deed. Nathan already agrees. This is happening one way or the other, and it's a lot easier if you just cooperate. I set down my dessert fork. Very slowly. I looked at this woman who I had just paid $48,000 to get married to my son, and I said quietly, no. She looked at me like no one had ever said that word to her before. Then she slapped me. Not hard enough to knock me sideways, hard enough that I heard it before I felt it. Hard enough that the table next to us went completely silent. Hard enough that I sat there for 3 full seconds just processing what had happened because my brain genuinely could not accept that this was real. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not touch her. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair. I looked at my son, who had appeared at her elbow in the confusion and was staring at me with an expression that I cannot fully describe, something between horror and apology and something else, something that looked almost like he was waiting to see which way I'd go. And I said, Nathan, we'll talk later. And I walked out. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time. I called my brother Eugene, who lives in Greensboro. He didn't answer. I called my friend Walt, not Walt in the name file, my real friend Walt, who I've known since 1987, and he picked up on the second ring, and I told him what happened, and he just said, brother, whatever you're thinking of doing, sleep on it first. I drove home. I did not sleep. By 7 the next morning, I had made 3 phone calls. The first was to my attorney, a man I have worked with for 11 years named, well, I'll just say his name is not important. I told him to begin the process of establishing a revocable living trust for my estate, structured specifically so that the lake house could not be transferred or accessed by anyone without my explicit written instruction during my lifetime. He said he could have preliminary documents ready within the week. I said fine. The second call was to my accountant. I asked him to review the gift tax implications of everything I had provided to Nathan over the past 4 years, the co-signed lease, the car payment assistance, the debt payment, and to document all of it formally. He asked if something had happened. I said, yes, something had happened, and I would explain later. The third call was to my bank. I removed Nathan as a secondary contact on 2 of my accounts. He had been added years ago for emergency purposes when he was in college. I should have updated that a long time ago. Then I drove to the wedding. I want you to understand why I went. I went because he is my son. I went because whatever Serena is and whatever she did and whatever Nathan had or hadn't known about that conversation, he is still my son and it was still his wedding day, and I was not going to let her take that from him too. I sat in the 3rd row. I watched him stand at the altar. He looked handsome. He looked nervous. When he saw me come in and sit down, something moved across his face. Relief, I think, or maybe just surprise. And I nodded at him, just once, so he would know that I was there for him. I did not look at Serena during the ceremony. The reception was at the Ballantine. I had paid for every table in that room. I sat with my cousin Howard and his wife who had driven down from Virginia, and we ate the salmon and talked about things that had nothing to do with weddings or slaps or lake houses. Nathan found me around 8 o'clock between the first dance and the cake. He put his hand on my shoulder and steered me toward a quiet corner near the emergency exit. He said, Dad. I need you to know that I didn't ask her to do that. I said, which part? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I knew she was going to bring up the lake house. I didn't know it was going to go like that. I said, Nathan, she put her hand on my face. He said, I know, Dad, and I'm sorry. She gets intense about things. She doesn't always. I said, stop. This is your wedding night. We're not going to fix this tonight. Go be with your wife. He looked at me for a moment like he was 12 years old and had just broken a window and was trying to figure out whether he was in trouble. Then he hugged me. I hugged him back. I held on for a second longer than I needed to. Then I went back to my table and finished my coffee. 2 weeks after the wedding, once Nathan and Serena were back from their honeymoon in St. Land, Lucia, which I had also quietly contributed $2,000 toward as a wedding gift. Before any of this happened, money I did not ask to be returned. Nathan called me to clear the air. Serena was on the call too. She said she wanted to apologize for how things had escalated. That was the word she used. Escalated. Not, I'm sorry I struck you. Not what I did was wrong. Escalated. Like the situation had simply gotten out of hand on its own, like no one in particular was responsible. I said, I appreciate you calling. I did not say, I accept your apology. That is a specific and deliberate thing I did not say. I also did not mention the trust. I did not mention the accounts. I did not mention anything I had done in the days after the rehearsal dinner. I just said I appreciated them calling and that I hoped they had a good trip and that we would be in touch. People ask me sometimes, friends, my brother, my cousin Howard, why I didn't do more. Why I didn't do more. Why I didn't make a scene at the dinner. Why I didn't call the police that night. Why I didn't confront Nathan directly and demand an explanation. Here's what I have learned in 64 years. When someone shows you who they are, the worst thing you can do is argue about it. You don't debate it. You don't propagate it. You don't perform your outrage for an audience. You take the information they have just given you for free, and you act accordingly. Serena showed me who she was before the rehearsal dinner. She showed me in the way she walked through my house the first time. She showed me in the way she, quote, through my house the first time. She showed me every time she called me by my first name without being invited to. She showed me in 1,000 small moments that I chose to overlook because I loved my son. She showed me one final, undeniable time at that table in front of 40 guests when she held out her hand and waited for me to give her something that was mine. I did not give it to her. I won't. The trust was finalized 6 weeks after the wedding. My attorney walked me through it on a Thursday afternoon in his office on Glenwood Avenue. I sat across from him at a mahogany desk and I signed my name in the places he indicated. The lake house is now held in the trust. During my lifetime, I am the sole trustee. I can use it when I want, invite who I want, do whatever I choose with it. Upon my death, it transfers not to Nathan outright, but to a subtrust structured in a way that protects the asset and specifies how it can be used. My attorney asked if I wanted to name a successor trustee. I thought about it. I named my niece, my brother Eugene's daughter, a woman I have always admired for her steadiness. She doesn't know yet. I'll tell her eventually. On the way home from my attorney's office, I stopped at the hardware store. I was getting a new lock set for the lake house. The old one was 12 years old, and the deadbolt had been sticking. The man behind the counter asked if I needed help. I said I was fine. I picked out a good one. Came with 2 keys. I drove out to the lake house that Saturday morning by myself. Took me 45 minutes. I had the windows down. The weather was still warm enough that the water would be nice. I sat on the dock for a long time with my coffee. The lake was quiet. There was a heron standing in the shallows on the far side. Linda always liked herons. She used to say they looked like they were thinking something important. I don't know what comes next with Nathan. I hope he finds his way. I hope whatever version of himself he becomes over the next 10 years is a version that makes him proud. I hope, and I mean this even now, that his marriage is a good one, not because Serena deserves anything from me, but because my son deserves a good life. I am not going to make it easy for anyone to take what I built, though, not anymore. I gave $48,000 and I co-signed a lease and I wrote a check for his credit card debt, and I sat in the 3rd row at his wedding the day after his wife put her hand across my face. I am a patient man, but patience has a structure, and when someone reaches their hand into that structure and tries to pull it apart, piece by piece, at a white linen table during dessert in front of 63 people, they find out that the structure is still standing after they've gone home. I installed that new lock on Saturday afternoon. Took me about 20 minutes. I put one key on my keychain. The other I locked in the small fireproof safe I keep in my office at home. The same safe where I keep Linda's jewelry and the deed to my house and my father's watch. If Nathan wants to come to the lake house, all he has to do is call me. That hasn't changed. The door is open to him. It always will be. But I hold the key, and I decide when the door opens. Tell me something. If this were your child, if this were your life's work, if someone looked at everything you built and decided it was already theirs, what would you do? Leave me a comment. I read every one. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot since that night at Hawthorne's. Not in any dramatic way. Just the quiet, factual way you start to see things clearly when the noise dies down. Serena didn't become who she is at that rehearsal dinner table. She was already that person the first time she walked through my house and complimented the square footage. She was already that person every time she looked through me instead of at me. What happened that night wasn't a sudden rupture. It was the end of a long sequence of small choices she had made, one after another over 2 years, each one building on the last. People don't slap their father-in-law across the face out of nowhere. That kind of behavior has a history. It always does. And Nathan, I love my son. I will love him until I draw my last breath. But I have had to sit with the truth that I was part of what shaped him. Every time I wrote a check without a conversation, every time I smoothed something over instead of letting him feel the edge of a consequence, I was trying to be generous. I think, if I'm honest, I was also trying to be needed. And somewhere in that, I taught him that difficulty could be avoided if you just had someone to call. That is on me. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not going to lie about it either. What I have learned, really learned, not just as a saying, but as something I now feel in my chest, is that integrity is not something you perform. It's something you maintain, quietly, in the decisions nobody applauds you for. Nobody was applauding me when I sat in that parking garage at 10:30 at night and called my attorney the next morning. Nobody saw me drive out to the lake house alone that Saturday and sit on the dock and think about Linda and think about the life I had built and decide calmly that I was not going to let fear or guilt or love, even the real kind, cause me to give away what wasn't mine to give away yet. That is what I mean by resolve. Not stubbornness, not anger. Resolve is when you know what is right and you do it anyway, even when doing it costs you something. It cost me a comfortable fiction about my son's marriage. It may cost me years of closeness with Nathan. I don't know yet, but I know that the alternative, handing over that deed, pretending the slap didn't happen, absorbing it all in silence forever, that would have cost me something I cannot replace. My own self-respect. My ability to look at Linda's photograph on the wall and feel like I had honored what we built. The lake house is still there. The heron is still in the shallows on the far side. The new lock works perfectly. I still have both keys. If there is anything I would want you to take from this, it is simply that the life you build is worth protecting, not with walls or anger, but with clear eyes and a steady hand. And when someone reaches for what is yours before you've offered it, the most powerful thing you can do is say no, stand up, and walk out with your jacket and your dignity still intact. I did that, and I'm still standing.